Good evening, everybody. This is a bit of a weird one because this is a pre-record. I'm going to try as a pre-record tonight and see how we get on. So there's none of the hellos and goodbyes and all that stuff tonight. But if you do want to say hello to each other, don't forget you can leave all your comments, and I'll be watching the comments as well because this is just a tryout, just to see how it works on a record and see if I can still interact with you, because there are times when unfortunately I've got no network and it's very frustrating when we're trying to sort of keep this going on a regular basis. And so yeah, this is where we are. We're just trying this new stuff out. So first of all, welcome along. Don't forget, subscribe to the channel, my YouTube channel. Share this with your installer friends, because it's great to have more and more people involved in this from our perspective. And on this one, this is a bit of a special. We've also got Tim Consolanti from Mobile Centre to help me along with this presentation as well. So we'll go on to the presentation. So tonight we're talking about fuse holders and fuse boxes. And I've got Tim alongside with me, and if I press this button here, here's the magic part. Here he is. Tim's on the line now. Welcome on board, Tim. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Jason. Yourself?
I'm fine, thanks, mate. It's good. It looks like it's all working. Fingers crossed.
Good.
So tonight we're going to talk about fitting fuse boxes and fuses and fuse holders and distribution. Going through the introduction now, we're looking at the considerations to think about before, the locations, the types and uses, distribution, and low level fusing as well. So the first one that we're going to talk about is accessibility, and as I say, Tim's helped along with this. So Tim, tell us all about the accessibility side of things.
If you're going to install that fuse, somebody needs to know where it is. If there's a problem, they need to be able to locate it, find it, get to it, and do something about it.
Yeah, exactly. And because that's it, serviceability. Can the end user identify the fuse used and obtain the right fuse for it? So it's kind of like using a common fuse as well, because there is always that consideration that you haven't used the right sort of fuses as well, or you haven't used the right type of fuse. Does it require a special type of fuse, like a slow blow fuse or a quick blow fuse as well, I would imagine?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you remember when we were looking at fuses, we had a large fuse called a T-class fuse. So that's quite a rare fuse. You wouldn't go into a car accessory shop or a Modes Factors and find one of those as a spare part. So let's say you've installed one for your customer and they have an issue. It's great that the fuse is blown, but then are they going to actually be able to get that vehicle back up and running? Where are they going to find a fuse from?
Yeah, absolutely. And then our final one on this slide is identification. So yeah, if you have got a lot of fuses in one, I'm sure you've got an example of this, Tim.
Yeah, I mean there's. I think we sort of touched on it earlier. There's like a sort of quite common individual MIDI fuse holder, and you see a lot of installations where they're sort of laid out on the board, and you've just got 4 or 5 black fuse holders. I think at the very least maybe have a number, because at least your customer could then have a key. They knew what fuse 1 was, fuse 2, fuse 3, fuse 4, and so on.
Yeah, and this is all part of a bigger thing, which is planning. To plan the install correctly, because if you can plan it correctly and you know where everything's got to go, then this sort of accessibility, serviceability, and identification just goes away.
Absolutely. I just think overall, as you know, if you plan your install, it tends to be an easier job and ultimately a neater job as well.
So we just move on to the next slide. And considerations. Does the fuse need to be accessible and identifiable? Is it a covert installation such as security? So what type of installation we talk about there, Tim? Is that like a tracking installation or something like that?
It could be like a tracking one. Some of the companies use it's like an inline fuse, like a very small diode, so it's quite hard to identify as a fuse, and it tends to be soldered in line, so the user can't get in and decide, okay, well, I don't want to be tracked today wherever I'm going. I'm going to pull the fuse out and off I go. So sometimes there is a need for the fuse to be not accessible, not identifiable.
Good. And we move on to the next slide. So location. So tell us a little bit about location, Tim.
Is it in an area where there's going to be fumes? So if we talk about, say, boats, for argument's sake, certain regulations about fuses and fuse holders mounted in engine rooms because it's an enclosed area. Again, fuses mounted on top of batteries if they're inside a battery box. If that battery's gassing, there's explosive gases then coming out of that battery. You don't want a fuse to blow and create the explosion. So yeah, I think you've got to consider the location of where that fuse holder's going and use the appropriate holder for the location.
So we're talking about here where, because I've seen this myself, where you've got like a fuse box, and they've used an internal fuse box, but what it is, it's they should be using an IP rated fuse box for external, rather than using just a standard fuse box basically, which would normally be mounted internal of the vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, if I sort of came away from the AVI and put my mobile centre hat on, we're quite happy because we're there selling fuse holders at a later point in time, especially on the outside of vehicles for stuff like tail lifts and things like that. The fuse holder's corroded, they're coming back, then we're then selling the customer a waterproof fuse holder, and in essence they're having to redo the job again. So realistically, again, it's that planning. If they'd use the right fuse holder in the first place, everything would be fine.
Yeah, good. Okay, so we'll just move on to the type of fuse and holder. So tell us all about that then,
Tim. Blade fuse holders, obviously the most common. Really, for applications such as about 20 amps continuous, that's where you would use a blade fuse holder. The exception to that is maxi fuses, which are larger, they've got a greater current carrying capacity. There's inverters, hand washes, different things now, higher current devices. That should then be a bolt down fuse. The last thing you want is heat building up in your fuse holder, melting the fuse or the fuse holder.
Cool. I do notice that a lot of people still use 30 amp fuses inside their fuse boxes though as well. I did see, and I'm sure we've mentioned before on a live stream where the fuse is a 30S, if you remember that. Was it 30S? 30S. Yeah, it was, wasn't it? It was 30S, where it was plated with, was it silver plated, was it?
Silver. S for silver.
Yeah. S for silver, yes it was. Yeah, so bringing back all my memories. So I know there's a few of them like that. But like I say, normally anything over 20 amps really should be managed by a maxi fuse. Then is that what you're saying?
A maxi fuse, or even a bolt down fuse, because you've got greater surface area. It is one of those times where sort of big is best. The more surface area, the better. Cool.
And then we see we can see a couple of photographs of some distribution modules. So you've got it looks like at the bottom you've got a non-water resistant one, and then the top one looks like a water resistant one. I can see that the top one has actually got like an earth bolt as well, or an earth bar. Is it an earth bar? Is that what you call it? An earth bar?
Yeah,
so it's got the earth bar.
Yeah,
it's got the bus bar as well. I noticed as well on one of your posts that about colourings and stuff. I mean, I agree. I think the colouring of cable is of vital importance, especially when you come to this level, because then you can identify, different circuits. You can identify the positive. You can certainly identify the negative as well. I think it's paramount to make sure that your outputs give the kind of identification that's required, so people can work it out really. So that's your two power distribution modules that we can see there. Then we go on to I think this is the lower end, or the lower end of the market, which is like your inline fuse holders. Tell us a bit more about the smaller inline fuse holders then, Tim.
So I picked two here. We've got the one that a lot of people of an older generation may recognise, that was extensively used by Nokia.
Yes,
in all
it's
of
the
their
Nokia one, isn't it?
91s, yeah, from the 2110 car kit and throughout. Nice design. It's got the little peg in the top, so it holds the fuse into the fuse. Fuses shouldn't fall out, but I think we were having this conversation earlier. Back in the day, there was a recommendation: have a little wrapper tape around your fuse holder. So that one, if you will, is an internal version, and then we've got the one with the cap on, so that becomes a splash-proof or a water-resistant inline fuse holder.
Yeah, and so that's particularly there where we see it. That's to be used externally. Obviously, you can still use the sealed fuse. I think probably I like using the splash-proof one both internally and externally, Tim. To be honest with you, from my perspective. And then we move on to, which we have, and I know we've covered these before, the old piggyback adder fuse sort of situation here. Tell us a little bit more about those, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, it's designed obviously to tap off an existing circuit. I think we covered it before. You have to be careful. You can't be running, huge amount of power through them, and you've also got to consider whatever that circuit is rated for originally, whatever it's doing. You can't overload it by adding in another device that's too power hungry.
And what sort of current would you say is acceptable on an adder fuse? What's the maximum?
Well, we talked earlier on, the maximum amount really we want to be putting through a blade fuse application is 20 amps. So that's a total of 20 across the two circuits. Personally, if I'm using an adder fuse, I'd only want to be using it for a low current, like an ignition live, maybe it's got a 1 amp fuse in it. I'd be happy with that. I think when you start sticking 5 and 7.5 and 10 amp fuses in, you need to be looking at a different way of doing it.
Yeah, so I would say adder fuse is pretty good, suppose, for a dash cam install maybe, where it's very, very low current. But when you start to talk about, say, for instance, I'm not going to say this, like a water heater or something. Yes, I know, but that's a bit daft, isn't it? But it is what it is, and we have seen, and I have seen installs where the adder fuse has been added, and it's like running something ridiculous,
like a pair of spotlights or something.
A pair of spotlights, yes. So yeah, that's the adder fuse. And then we move on to the MIDI and the mega fuses. So that's your standard MIDI and mega fuse. So we'll have a chat about that then, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, I picked these two because they're stackable, nestable, whatever your persuasion is of how you want to describe that. So if you had more than one of them, you can slide them into each other and they'll lock in and basically create a larger fuse holder. So it gives you that opportunity if you're fitting a number of MIDI or mega fuses to, I don't know, neaten your installation up and condense it to keep it in a smaller footprint, and they lock in.
Yeah, I've just brought up the slide actually with the expandable interlocking one there. I will go back a couple of slides because I know I've jumped a couple. But there is the talk about the water resistant MIDI and mega, obviously, they're for external use, but it looks like they interlock as well. I take it, Tim, as well. Yeah, great.
Yeah, they do, and they can be used as an inline holder as well. They've got some holes in for just put cable ties and actually wrap them around an existing loom. So real nice fuse holder.
Brilliant. And then we've got I'll go back to the red one. Red for positive. I remember, like I say, you said we mentioned this earlier about red for positive and black for negative. Yes, totally agree with you there. There's far too many issues where we see red heat shrink, black heat shrink being used on a red connector or on a red cable. Yeah, it just adds to the confusion, doesn't it, at the end of the day?
Definitely.
Cool. And so finally, after we've gone through the interlocking expandable, that's all there is to it for tonight, Tim. We've gone through our session. So now is going to be your question and answer session. We'll leave it all open to you to do your question and answers. Please leave your comments. Tim's going to be online as well as myself being online as well to look at this live stream and to watch through. So please, leave your question and answers at this point. But thanks very much for watching. If you have watched it, and if you haven't watched it, sorry. But if you have watched it, thanks a lot. Let us know and see what you think. Hopefully this will work out a lot better. But I won't be doing... This is only just to try it out so that I can make sure that I can still carry on doing live streams, even though I may not be in a good broadband area. Right, so I'll leave you with our end credits. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook and what have you. Thanks very much for joining. Thanks, Tim, for joining as well. Appreciate all the help that you've been giving us at the Association of Vehicle Installers. If you did, I've just remembered, if you did want to catch up with Tim as well, Tim runs a company called Mobile Centre. Give it the nod. Have a look on LinkedIn under Mobile Centre, or he has got a web address as well, www.mobilecentre.co.uk. So that's it for tonight, folks. Hope you're well. See you soon.